The BRM Parawing. Alright, I have spent the last year in the Hurt Locker, the Downwind SUP Hurt Locker, and this bad boy has just turned up. And I want to answer a few questions. Look, is this going to replace downwinding altogether, or is it just a fad? I also want to answer the question, look, can you do legitimate upwind, downwinds on your own without the shuffle, without the faff? That's the main reason why I bought it. And so I'm also going to answer that question. And then lastly, look, what are the restrictions? What are the drawbacks? And is it right for you? Like with always, please like and subscribe, share this with your mates, send it out as much as possible, really helps us do more content like this. Okay, so let's start off with the sizes and the conditions that I've used it in. So I have been lucky enough to beg, steal and borrow a 2.9, a 4 and a 5. And I've used it from everything from 5 knots to all the way to about 35 knots. So I've really used it in a broad range of conditions and managed to find its limitations, which I'll share with you. So my first takeaway is that this thing likes a breeze. It's obviously been tested in a really strong, constant wind location, Maui, from where the design is from, and it's not designed for super gusty light winds, that's for certain. The bigger sizes are a bit of a handful, and when the wind dies, it becomes a bit of a nightmare. It's also worth noting that it has a much smaller wind range than I was expecting. So with a wing, 5 meter wing that I'm used to, look, I could probably get going in around 7 all the way up to about 20 knots with a 5 meter. With the BRM, you're looking at around 15 knots to sort of 18 knots at the moment. Now, of course, it's early doors, and as my skill level increases, I'm sure that will widen. But right now, I'm finding it a very narrow wind range for the size. Now, the big negative of that is I just don't think you can get away with buying one BRM Parawing and expecting that to span the whole conditions that you're going to get exposed to. You probably need 2, if not 3, which then becomes incredibly expensive. So one of the big alarm bells that was ringing for me with the lack of low end, the poor light wind conditions, is that if you're in a location where the wind isn't quite strong or it's quite fluctuating, if you're out downwinding and the wind drops, you're in a world of trouble trying to get this back up again. And I can see that being a problem. I'll talk about how to mitigate that a little bit later on, but it's definitely something to consider. Now, on the other end of the scale, when it really starts to blow, the wing can become a bit boisterous. You definitely need a harness to be able to get locked in and go upwind. Now, with all of that being said, when the wind is in its sweet spot, it flies beautifully, it feels controlled, and it definitely does what it says on the tin, which is take you upwind and then you can pack away and go downwind. So it's a big tick, but the wind range is really small. So let's look now at board size and board selection. So I started off thinking that a big downwind board was the go-to. My first few sessions, or my first 2 sessions, were on my downwind board. This was all well and good, and it did get up pretty early, but the big downside of it is that I found the nose of the board kept on running over the lines and getting tangled up. As soon as I went down to a mid-length, it all became much more manageable. And actually, I think I should have done that from the get-go, is start off on a 75 litre mid-length, slightly shorter board. Still efficient, but just slightly smaller and more manageable. Now, the technique for getting up is very similar to winging at an advanced level. And what I mean by that is less pumping with the wing and more pumping with the board. The BRM Parawing itself kind of sits there. You can give it a few little tugs to get up, but the majority of the work happens under your feet to get the board releasing and then up onto foil. Again, you do need an efficient board to be able to do that. But what I found, the smaller size of the board allows the maneuverability and gives you a little bit more control. Now, it's great to have a small board like that, and downwind, it feels amazing and it just puts a massive smile on your face. But the big downside of it is if it all goes wrong, you're on a tiny little board that you've got to paddle home on. So I would suggest you need to mitigate that by not doing massive sends offshore with a small board. We've talked about how it is a nightmare when the wind dies. I would not want to be in that position. Now I want to talk about some of the modifications that I've made to my gear since I've been testing it. So when it turns up, it's pretty bog standard. There's no leash, there's no harness. You do get a lot of attachments, but it doesn't actually come with a harness itself. So the first thing I did was put a harness on, and that makes a world of difference. What is strange about the harness is the position of it. It's really far forward. I went out for the first session with it right in the middle, and it was just all off balance. I moved it to the very front, and all of a sudden it became stable and locked in. Obviously you need to adapt the belt that comes with it to put a little harness hook onto it. They're relatively cheap, and there's lots of those out on the market right now, so I'd highly recommend doing that as well. Now what I've also done is add a pigtail to the bottom of the bar itself. This allows me to attach a leash to the bar, so not only when I let go, it lies flat on its back, ready to go, almost ready to launch instantaneously, but the big advantage is that it stops the bar from getting wrapped up into the lines. Since I've attached that leash, I've had 0 tangles. So I've also had to modify the belt to be able to attach the leash on. A very simple rope that's just put on, but it would have been nice to have some more solid attachment points on the belt. In addition, I've also put a kite harness style back loop, which allows the board to be attached to the same harness. I was finding myself having rope hanging off me everywhere with the board leash and the kite leash and you name it. So having it all in one place is really handy, and it keeps it really tight and tidy. I do want to talk about the issue of packing the wing away and riding the bumps downwind, because once it's away, it's when the magic really happens. But that moment of putting it into the belt, look, that is challenging to begin with. You've got to read the bumps almost on autopilot whilst you concentrate on putting the wing away into the bag. Now, the more experience you have at downwinding, obviously the easier that is. Now, interestingly, when I eventually packed it away, I figured that out, I had some of the best sessions I've ever had downwinding. It is an incredible experience to be on such a small board, a small foil, and downwinding in the open ocean. Until I had that experience, I was a little bit on the fence with it. I wasn't sure that it was gonna take off and everybody was gonna love it. But the moment I started gliding down, it put such a smile on my face. In fact, I would say it was probably the best downwind session I've ever had. And what topped it off was the fact that when I got to the bottom, I popped the wing back up again and did the run 3 or 4 times. Yes, it is quite obviously a V1. You can see that it's going to need some development, but I am not going to take away from the fact that it is an incredible product. Right now, my wings and my downwind board are getting put to the back of the garage, and when it's windy, all I want to do is go out on the BRM, and that screams volumes. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the reason why I bought it was because I wanted to have downwinding on my own terms, not having to do the car shuttle and coordinate with other people. My schedule is quite hectic and chaotic, and sometimes it's really difficult to coordinate. So for that, I needed a product that goes upwind as good as, if not better than, a wing. Now, after my first 1 or 2 sessions, I wasn't sure that this was going to be the thing I was looking for. But as I've got better, and after session 5, I'm now going upwind, not quite as good as my wind wing, but not far off. And it definitely does what I wanted it to do, which is allow me to get access to really good quality bumps without having to do a 3-hour car shuttle and admin nightmare. So in answer to the question I set out at the start, yes, it absolutely does the upwind, downwind that I was looking for. I think that this is where the Parawing sits. It's being able to go upwind, enjoy the bumps in a place where you otherwise wouldn't be able to. It does not replace downwind supping. And the reason for that is because I would not want to be offshore in moderate to light winds with a BRM and a small board. Those conditions are firmly in the downwind SUP area, and I think anything that's a bit gnarly or a bit light, I'm still going to be using my downwind SUP. So in terms of a comparison, this is me doing a paddle up in exactly the same conditions. It was 10 minutes different from when I had the Parawing, and you can see how easy it is to get up and then ride the bumps. I think this proves that the Parawing definitely doesn't replace downwinding. There is no way I would have been able to get up and enjoy conditions like that. So my advice would be, if you still want to experience those really big ocean swells in marginal conditions, then unfortunately you've still got to jump on the pain train and learn how to downwind sup. But trust me, it's worth it. Now, another element that sets this aside from downwind supping is in enclosed waters, so bay runs or on lakes. Generally, when you start those runs, it's really flat at the start, and there's either a lot of paddling or a lot of drifting or a lot of pumping until the conditions get good. Not with the BRM Parawing. You can get up straight away and then start enjoying the carves, having a great time, practicing putting it away, pump for a bit, up it goes again. And you can have fun until it starts getting good, and then you can pop it away and then really enjoy the conditions. And then what's more is that when you get to the bottom, you can just rinse and repeat and keep doing that. Really, it comes into its own in those conditions. So in summary, it's not going to replace downwind supping for those that are looking for the ultimate experience, but it definitely does have its place. I was a little bit deflated after my first 1 or 2 sessions, but when the conditions were right and my skill increased, really, I tasted the magic, and I don't think there's any going back. The guys at BRM should be very proud of the product that they have produced. They have looked into the future and brought us a next generation product that other companies aren't even thinking about right now. If I was a product developer for a major brand, I would 100% be getting on board this, because I think this is going to be the next big thing, and definitely it's going to introduce downwinding to a huge amount of people that otherwise wouldn't be able to. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, type in the comments below, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. See you on the water again soon.